There's so many reasons why I love hearing that tune. Yes, it's because it's time for another week of the RecPoker podcast. Yes, it's because I have the best job in the world and I get to hang out here on Monday nights and talk to my friends about poker. But also, it just means that we've hit the audio cues. So far, this podcast is going flawlessly, without error. Everything's going great. So I'm so glad to be here like I am every week. Regular listeners will know this is the RecPoker podcast. The RecPoker community is a group of serious but fun-loving amateur poker players. Just because we think of poker as something that we do recreationally doesn't mean that we don't succeed. We've got some great results here on the RECing Crew. Some of our premium members are actually quite accomplished players, but we love poker for the fun of it. It's the Rec Poker experience, but it's more fun when you win. So we play together, we learn together, we teach together, we celebrate together, and we try and get better at this great game of poker week in and week out over here at rec.poker. So I have to encourage our folks, if you're listening and this podcast sounds like a fun group of people to get involved with, go sign up for a free account right now, run to your keyboard and head on over to www.rec.poker. Sign up for a free community account there. All it takes is an email address and a smile, although both are compulsory. And because most of what we do here is free, it's a largely volunteer-based organization, I have to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and our sponsor just for this segment this week, Laundry Pods. Laundry Pods. People, stop eating laundry pods. Okay, that was a word from our special segment sponsor just for this week. I also have to thank our premium members because we couldn't do what we do here without our premium members. Using the code RecPoker gets your first month for only $5, but even after that, it's only $15 a month. That gets you access to all the training materials, the social events, discounts on other training sites, great prizes, access to the RECing Crew and me, more coaching availability. It's a fantastic way not only to open up your own poker game, but also just to share your support for what we're doing here at RecPoker. So thank you to all of our premium members. And if you're a community member who's thinking about taking the leap, this is a good time. We've got some pretty exciting stuff coming up, and I'd encourage you to go drop that $5. Use that code RecPoker and sign up for a premium membership today. One of the perks, as I mentioned, is that you get to spend more time with the RECing Crew. You probably know my voice by now because I host the podcast every Monday night, but I am just one of the members here on the RECing Crew that make all the magic happen behind the curtain here at RecPoker. If you want to find out more about me and other members of the RECing Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen up because you're going to meet a couple of them right here tonight.
Well, I am Chris Jones, and I think that celebrating a flawless audio cue show 30 seconds into the show is sort of like having ace king against queens and spiking your ace on the flop and being like, dancing around the room and not waiting for the turn and river where the queen comes. But anyway, you can find me 5b5 on Twitter or 5x5 in the Poker Stars home game.
And I am John Somsky, also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere. And I have to figure out what I'm going to make for dinner tomorrow because Jim just ruined all my plans.
Nope, sorry, buddy. No more laundry pads for you. Our sponsors have spoken. It's not allowed. Thanks, guys. And good point, Chris. That turn and river is coming, and we have lots of opportunities to screw up an audio cue as we get here tonight. So, the future is bright, but you never know what's going to happen. So this is the chats edition of the podcast. Every week we do 2 episodes. We do a chats edition talking to someone who's just cool and interesting in the poker world. And then we also do a forums edition where we really dig into the strategy every week. I'm really excited to be welcoming Wesley Cannon here to the chats edition. Wes is a fixture in Minnesota, and he's been on our radar for a while. We finally set out the lasso and looped him in. And we're bringing him in. So, Wes, thank you so much for joining us here on the RecPoker podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully that queen doesn't come on the turn and river here, but you never really know. So
you never really know. And there's some sneaky Broadway combos that can come too. I mean, it's there's all sorts of ways this can go wrong, but I've got a good feeling about it so far. Speaking about good feelings so far, Wes, I was just scrolling through Twitter before we got started today, and I mentioned we put out a tweet saying that you were going to be on the podcast today, and someone responded and said, "Oh, great, he's the nicest guy in poker." So I guess my first question, how are you going to respond to this kind of slanderous accusation?
Well, I'm sure there are some good people in the Medicaid scamming business too, but it's not saying a whole lot. So No, I mean, I appreciate it. I always try and have fun at the tables and make the experience good for everyone. I mean, part of playing is just making the experience good for people playing with you too. And I do happen to know who that guy was who said that. And I will say he was messaging me a little bit before that saying that I had a face for radio and that he hopes I don't have stage fright. So, there's two sides to every story. But I appreciate the one he put out for everyone else to see. So
there you go. I like that. So let's start with that, Wes. So I like to start these interviews by kind of asking our guests to put themselves in the box a little bit. If our listeners don't know who you are, how do you, if you met someone at a cocktail party and they asked you, what's your role in the poker world? What would you tell them? How would you describe your own role in the poker world?
Yeah. So I've been playing full time for about a year and a half now. The years leading up to that, I was kind of considered myself a rec player, but was slightly winning more and more, kind of considered myself a semi-pro, and then been full time for about a year and a half. I also do a little bit of coaching, probably for players that I see a bit of myself in from a few years ago, so I could have something to teach them. But yeah, play full time. If there are some of the listeners who listen to the Poker Guys podcast, The Breakdown, I have done a bunch of solver work in the last year and a half, 2 years for some of their shows. So could know me from that too.
Yeah, awesome. I'm sure many do. Your name was familiar to me from that, as well, from just sort of like the Minnesota scene. Why don't we start with that? So how do you go from being a slightly winning recreational player to being part of the Breakdown, doing solver work for them, coaching part-time, playing full-time? That feels like a real ascent as a player. Talk me through that experience a little bit.
Yeah. A few different things. So obviously a lot of it just comes from studying a lot, playing a lot, learning from tons of mistakes, recognizing that no matter how good I do get, there will still be different types of mistakes I make. And a lot of it too, I think, is the other side, sort of the mental game that I think gets overlooked a lot. Certain things like just playing within your bankroll, recognizing, if you take a bad beat or like 10 bad beats in a row, whatever it is, that you might be a little tilted, you might be off your game, and just sort of working on that. And because one thing I've said to some people is like, I think there are plenty of people who take poker kind of seriously who could pass a quote unquote poker test if it was given in like a college exam type of format. But then when they get on the table, maybe they're drinking or maybe they're in a great mood or a terrible mood, and that'll change how they play. And not only does that get them off their game, but, other people pick up on that too and can take advantage of it. So learning to just stay really level and not get too high or too low. So.
Yeah, when we were emailing just briefly to set up this conversation, and I should say, if you're in the YouTube chat, we record this live every week on YouTube. If you've got questions for Wes, type away into the chat there. And of course, just like every week, we'll be doing our raffle at the end of the show. Someone's going to win a free month of Rec Poker or a free month of Range Trainer Pro or pokercoaching.com Learn Pro Poker. There's a whole bunch of amazing sites that we give away prizes for here at Rec Poker. So stick around in the chat and type your questions for Wes. So when we were preparing for this interview a little bit, we talked about kind of the importance of some of those infrastructure aspects of poker. I often refer to them as kind of like the non-sexy parts of poker, things like bankroll management and game selection. It sounds like that's something that you really took seriously as you started to transition from being a recreational player to a more professional player. how can you tell if you're taking bankroll management seriously enough, or like what is the difference between someone who is like, oh yeah, I'm totally responsible with my bankroll, and then people that are actually being responsible with it and giving themselves a chance to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a player and you ever feel like there's a chance your bankroll could go to zero or anywhere close, you're probably just doing it wrong, whether that's bankroll management or you're just losing in general. But yeah, that really shouldn't be a consideration. Like, I am mostly a tournament player. And so obviously with tournaments, you'll have stretches where you fire a bunch of buy-ins without caching or just caching small maybe. And you should really be able to go into any tournament and be able to fire as many times as long as you're feeling good. You're not there shouldn't be a tournament where you put in a buy-in and it feels like you can only do one bullet, or because a second bullet would be too much. No, I'm not necessarily speaking for someone who plays a few times a year. Like, that's much different. But if you're someone who plays a lot, like, you're never going to be at your best if you're in a situation where you feel like you need to make something out of this one buy-in, because then you'll miss out on spots where you have an opportunity to gain an edge, but it might also result in you going bust. So yeah, that's generally how I would say. And a lot of times I've heard players say like, well, when I have that big score, I want it to be all, I want to have all of it. I don't want to give it out to someone. I mean, neither do I, but I'm also not going to be able to fire a bunch of bullets in 1100, or at least, at the beginning, I wouldn't have been able to fire a bunch of $1,100, $1,500 buy-ins if I knew that I could just go on a 30 or 40K downswing all on my own too, so.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me to the next thing I want to talk about here. So you've been improving as a player, you've been taking your poker career more seriously. Tell us a little bit about sort of the games that you were playing as a rec, and then how that's changed, the different games that you're playing in now, and what that transition has looked like.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess it depends on how far back you go, but I actually used to be a little bit more of a cash game player. In the start of the pandemic and whatnot, I played some 2-5, 5-10 home games, played some other, in Vegas, I would play 5-10 at Bellagio, 2-5, wherever. And then I got more into tournaments, but I think also one thing I would say is when I was playing more recreationally, I wouldn't necessarily select my games that with that much purpose, I guess. And this especially goes for online, I would say, because I don't know if I mentioned, but I play, on Global, on Ignition. I definitely play more online than live, at least like as far as games. Obviously, as far as hours, live takes a lot of time. But, when you're, and this is why, when I say I play online, people automatically say like, oh, ACR. I'm like, actually not so much on ACR, because it is a lot tougher than Ignition and Global. And like, I do this full time. Like, I'm trying to pay myself here. And I do think playing against tough competition is good for getting better, certainly. But I try to not put in too much volume on ACR, because it's like, I just recognize that it's a lot harder to beat the games on there.
And Wes, I just want to jump in, because you're saying specifically that just the fields are softer on these other sites. And so, part of being a successful poker player is playing in soft games, and you have to, you'll make more money playing against a softer field than you will against a tougher field. So that, and is there something, I know Chris has a question here as well, but I've also heard that the Ignition fields are pretty soft. I'm in Canada, so I have access to different games than you do down there in the States.
Yeah.
But what do you think makes for a softer field? Like, why is Ignition or Global a better player pool for you than ACR?
A couple reasons. So for one, just on ACR, you're allowed to use like heads up displays and stuff. So there are more players using that sort of stuff and really taking it. It appeals a lot more to players who are really taking it seriously, I think. And frankly, and this is, the unfortunate part, I think there's more of the cheating type of stuff going on there, real-time assistance and whatnot. I know that's been kind of a big discussion in the poker Twitter sphere recently. So
the hellscape, we call it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and one more point on that topic I wanted to make, as far as like live tournaments go. I've also been asked, like, do you want to play 5Ks and 10Ks, like if you had a backer, which I do sell action a lot of times, but I don't have a backer per se. And my answer is kind of like, well, if I know I'm good enough, maybe, but the edges are, I can win at such a higher rate at the 1100, 1500 type of buy-ins. So what's the point? It would probably be less fun, first off, because there's so many more pros and less rec players just having fun there. And I mean, I don't need, maybe I would have a small edge. I don't really know. The only 10K I've played is one time at the World Series main, which is not a good representation of all 10Ks anyway.
Yeah,
so
true. Yeah, don't let anyone play in that thing. Yeah, that makes sense. Chris, did you have something you want to jump in with?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to follow up about I was as I was kind of preparing for this interview, I was looking over your Hendon, and it really looks like, to me, I mean, you fill in the gaps for me, but it really looks like the pandemic really was a big sort of kind of big shifting moment for you. You were mostly playing like under $200 tournaments, having success in them. Then we all had this sort of forced gap in play. Maybe you're playing online during this time, but there's not much of a record there. Nobody could play live. And then you come back and now you're starting to play 1100s. You have a third place finish very
Riverside,
quickly out of the gates. Yeah, at Riverside for 77 gay. Congrats. And then you're just on a tear. You're just at MSPTs and 1100s, and you're doing phenomenally well. So walk me through. Was that time, that sort of that forced isolation time, was that like a time when you just like said, okay, I've got this time, I'm gonna like sit down, I'm gonna study hard, or what walk me through where, what took you from those 200s to that MSPT sort of third place finish?
Yeah, I think the pandemic did play a big role. All of a sudden there was kind of this gap in social life that was available. And I already was very, I took poker semi-seriously, I would say. But now there's all this extra time. So I did play more online, and then also eventually started getting more into home games. But that did play a role. I started studying a lot more. I got on a couple of the training sites. I paid for a little coaching of my own. And so, yeah, like I said, initially it was for cash games. And then, like you said, in 2021, that third place in Riverside, that was my like fourth MSPT. And I had only fired one or two bullets in the previous ones. So that was a big moment for me. I think in 2020, I think I got quite good at cash games. And then my friend, Ian Matakis, actually, I'm sure you guys know him. I hired him for some coaching and only did a few sessions, but he really pointed out some big points where tournaments are a lot different than cash games. That helped me out a lot. And then frankly, like once I did have the big score for 77K in the tournament, then I'm like, well, I love these things now,
They're so easy. Who are you?
Yeah. So, and that was about 2 months before I started playing full time. I think a lot of people who play, especially younger people who play like, competitively, they study, they're maybe small winning players. I think not all of them, but a lot of them would like to see if they could play professionally at some point, even if it's not like their whole life. And for me, it was like I think I can do it. And if I can, this will be the time when if I am doing it full time, it will force me to study as hard as I can to keep getting better. So yeah, and then obviously that big score just helped me bankroll wise too.
And just to kind of follow up, because like one of the things that we often hear from our audience and rec players is like they want to study more, they want to get better, but they sometimes don't know where to start. So what things did that were sort of a point of emphasis? I know you've done solver work for the poker guys. You're somewhat known for doing that. Was that part of the study work, or were there some elements of your game and transitioning from cash to tournaments that really needed work, or what were you really focused on in terms of your study?
Yeah, so that did help. Solver work helps. I will say in general, I think learning stuff like theory, people sort of confuse it as like you should be a GTO or an exploitative player. And I think the better way to look at it is you study, game theory, optimal play, so you learn what exploits to make and how to, what mistakes your opponents are making. As far as studying for tournaments specifically, so the thing about tournaments is so much of it happens pre-flop, especially once you're in the later stages when the average stacks can be 20, 25 big blinds. I would recommend using Pre-Flop Academy for that. If you're really serious about getting good. They have you can basically choose any effective stacks, any positions, 3 bets, 4 bets, cold 4 bets, multi-way, pre-flop, like all sorts of stuff that you just never get from other charts. And I think a couple common mistakes that I see among people who, play a lot, study a little, but could go more in depth is so early in tournaments when you're playing 100 blinds deep and there's no ICM or whatever. I think people have this idea that you should be tighter in tournaments than cash, when it's really the opposite when there's no ICM, because there's no rake out of the pot and there's an ante. So there's a huge incentive to go for the chips in the middle. And then the other one is you actually, in almost every situation, if there's a multi-way pot pre-flop, like let's say you're in the big blind, middle position raises, and then, maybe cut off and button both call, you should actually defend your big blind less when there are multiple callers, which is a little counterintuitive because people think, oh, I'm getting a much better price, right? Which is true. But, when there are multiple people to the flop, you're just not going to be able to realize the equity that your hand has, especially offsuit hands. But there's just so many other players that could bet on the flop. And, if you flop bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw and your head's up, you can continue against a bet. Multi-way, you just can't. So, those are the sorts of things I've learned from studying a lot of pre-flop stuff in tournaments. And also, there are a lot of training sites out there. I've tried a few. I don't have, other than Pre-Flop Academy, I don't have one specifically that I'd recommend. But I would also say just talk to players who have had success in tournaments. If you know me personally, you can always ask me. I don't have all the answers, but if you're friends with players who have had success in tournaments that you haven't had, just like run hands past them. I think that helped me get good too, is like just bouncing these ideas off them. And then suddenly I would realize like, oh, I kind of think I know what they're going to say to this one, and then learn to implement that into my game.
Yeah, I know when I got started in poker, I spent years just learning on my own, watching videos, listening to podcasts, doing my own charts and stuff like that. And it was definitely good for building a foundation. But I could have learned a lot faster if I had just asked some other people for help, joined a
Yeah.
community, started talking. But I think the problem is for a lot of people, listen, we love poker and we've got good friends, but our friends don't love poker the way that we love poker. So it's kind of hard to find other people to start talking about poker with. And that's why, the value of a training site or a coach or a community like RecPoker, I think people don't understand just how valuable it is to have good people that you like who also enjoy talking about poker. Right?
Yeah. And I would add too, make sure it's someone who's a winning player, because I think poker players, we all think we're smarter than the average person. And we all have our own strong opinions on things, and they can't all be correct. So
yeah, you said it. So when you were making the transition, you said you got some coaching with Ian. Ian's been on the show. He's been a friend of the group here for a long time. What made you decide to seek that out? Like, what made you decide to sort of switch into looking for someone to get help? And how did you choose Ian? And what was that? Did that how exactly did that help you think transition as a player?
Yeah, so it really helped me because what we did was we went over my own hands that I played online, and it's one thing to go over examples that a training site uses when they're teaching you. But when you see hands that you've played, that you've either done something right or wrong, it's a lot easier to learn quickly that way, for me at least, and probably for a lot of other people. Because when you see someone make a mistake, you can always tell yourself, oh yeah, no, I think I would have gotten that one right. But when you make the mistake, there's nowhere to hide. So it's a lot easier to be honest with yourself that way. And as far as Ian specifically, I've known him for maybe 5 years. We just played in a couple home games together a long time ago that one of our mutual friends hosted. And, I've always been impressed by him. I mean, he's, I think, 3 years younger than me, and he had been crushing tournaments around here, back then when I met him. That was like when he was starting off. So,
cool.
Yeah.
And when you're coaching, so you mentioned you do some coaching as well. What's that experience like? Does that different students or clients have a different approach, or do you kind of have a way that you like to approach coaching? Or if folks want to take some coaching with you, what are they in for? What are they kind of signing up for from that point of view?
Yeah, so you have to get up at 5 a.m. Just kidding. No, so I like to do it the same way, where most of the time they'll have online hands that we go through. One student I'm working with now, he actually, when he plays, he'll just take notes on his phone of every pot he enters, which is great. Like, that's, I don't do that, but I think it's important to use your own hands to review. Because even if I want to teach stuff that just revolves around theory, it's still so much better to be like, okay, here's this exact situation that you were in, so you can look for it next time.
And what are some common mistakes? You talked a little bit about like defending the big blind too often, multi-way, sort of just like tightening up versus loosening up in various tournament stages. Those were good lessons for you. What are some other kind of common mistakes that you think recreational players, even serious, thoughtful recreational players, are making that kind of are holding them back from taking that next step, on or off the felt?
Right. Yeah. So I was going to say, I actually have, I could think of some on the felt ones, but my mind first went to some off the felt things. Like, we had talked about bankroll management. That's one thing. There's also stuff like playing blackjack or playing pit games. Like I never do that stuff, but it's like, if you're trying to play poker for profit, why would you go play these games where you can't have a skill edge, you know? I mean, I know blackjack, there's maybe a little bit, but like a lot of these other games, there's none. And so, and that's just going to, not only is that going to like deplete your bankroll in the long run, but I feel like it'll just get in your head mentally too, because you know, the more you do that stuff, the more you are just getting in the mindset of you're going to lose when you're at the casino. And, you know, if you're playing these games where I think a lot of the appeal of them are probably just the gambling aspect of it, that's going to filter into your poker game where you're suddenly, even though you might, as I had said, like on paper, you might know the right answer in a situation, you're going to be more inclined to gamble, you know, play for that, whatever it is, that rush. So I think avoiding things like that and, you know, just being cognizant of why you're playing. If you are playing poker, if you're a more serious recreational player and you're looking to play profitably, like, you know, do the things that will get you the most focused when you're playing, and, you know, treat it like it's your job, even if it's not. You know, if you look at a lot of the high roller guys, a lot of them are in really good shape. And I think they, you know, they take their diet, they take their physical fitness seriously. And, you know, I like to at least go to the gym a few times. I've noticed that a few times a week, I've noticed that just helps me stay a little sharper in general. I don't love working out, definitely not a bodybuilder, but so yeah, I think in general, doing all those things can just help you be at your most focused level when you're at the table.
Is it a question of like discipline? Is it a question of excluding things or like focusing on things? Because I think you're right. I think this is a leak, a pretty big leak for a lot of players, recreational and professional. Is there a way? How should we be thinking about this? If we want to get better at that kind of thing, is it just saying no to our own weaknesses and impulses, or is there something like more constructive than that?
Yeah. So, well, for me personally, I don't ever want to play in those games, but, you know, those pit games and stuff. So I think a lot of it is just developing good habits. And sometimes that means, you know, sometimes that's a change for people. Some people don't really get into other stuff anyways, but yeah, I think it's different for everyone. I mean, you know, especially if you have friends who like to go to the casino and gamble or do whatever. Sometimes it means kind of separating, you know, your social time from your focused time. But yeah, no, I don't know. It can be different for a lot of people. And I think it's fair to say that, you know, there are some people, like when you play poker, you obviously see people who can sometimes struggle with the other stuff. And so for some people, it could just mean avoiding it altogether too. So.
Yep. Chris Jones, you've got something coming up again.
I think I was going to ask a question from YouTube here, from Danny Wood here.
Danny Wood, our resident professional podcast prize winner. All this guy does is show up and win the raffle every week. Welcome back to the show, Danny.
So Danny writes, Wes, you know, he says, boy, you seem to really frequently crush at the 500 or 1500 buy-in level. I think this is a follow-up on the bankroll question, though. But so his question is, what is equilibrium, or how do you track being a winning player? Is it just profitability, or are you looking at some sort of like X buy-in or ROI target to consider yourself, you know, successful?
That's a good question. And so honestly, no, like in the grand scheme of like professional poker players, I'm still relatively new to that. So I don't even know what my benchmark should really be necessarily. And the other thing is when you are accounting for just live tournaments, especially, like, my ROI on like $1,100 buy-ins is like over 200 or about 200%. So it's like,
That's not bad.
that's not bad. And I also don't necessarily think that's sustainable.
Right.
So for me personally, the way I look at it is I'm just trying to make a certain amount of money to support myself and then hopefully more to like build my bankroll, continue playing a lot more. So for me, it's more based on that. Because honestly, as far as live tournaments, I don't have a relevant sample size. Online, I know that Ignition doesn't really have anywhere where you can track it, but on global, you can check like Sharpscope and see your ROI on all your tournaments you've played over time. And I think mine, if we're not counting sit and goes, because I'm like dead break even on those, but in MTTs, I'm at about 40%. And so for me, I'm like, well, if that goes, that's over thousands of tournaments. So if that starts going significantly lower, then I know I'm maybe getting off my game or need to change something.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And then,
yeah.
And then Danny has a follow-up here, which I think I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it to you. So as a winning player in terms of bankroll, are you focused more on cashing consistently or chasing all, the money at the top, the big score? And how do you balance that in terms of how you approach a tournament?
Yeah, definitely the high scores. If you're going to be profitable at all, you need those because there's no way you can cash at a higher enough percentage to be profitable if you don't have those big scores. If, for example, the MSPTs, they pay like 10 or 11%. So if I'm cashing at like 20%, well, a min cash is about 2 buy-ins or something. So that's never going to add up. Whereas if you have the 1 or 2 cashes where it's like 50 or 70 or 100 buy-ins, getting up to those spots is so much more important. That's not to say, look, if they're paying 90 and there's 92 left and you have a middling stack, it's not to say you should just look to get it in as a coin flip. Like min cashing does matter as well, but it doesn't really matter until you're very close to it. And I think that's especially worth noting in large fields like MSPT or even bigger fields like the World Series, where it's like, okay, 350 players cash. If there's 360 left, I can't really change my odds of winning the tournament right now. But getting over that min cash hump is, 1.7 or 2 buy-ins, whatever it is. So it's not, I think some people like to, say, oh, I don't care about the min cash. And it's like, well, there's a time and a place where you should, but no, your overall tournament strategy should be almost always just to accumulate as many chips as you can early. And then, as if you're on a day 2 of like an MSPT, still have that mostly in mind. Because, the worst feeling is if maybe you made the money, but then you're sitting on 6 big blinds and you're looking back at a spot, you're like, I really should have gone for it there. Like I could be in such a good situation to final table this thing, but now I'm going to have to get it in and I'm not going to be able to be selective with my hands. So,
yeah. Sometimes I see players who fold in that, like right before the bubble, they fold and when they've got a really good spot. and then they fold themselves down to 6 blinds and maybe, or, 6 blinds, and then maybe they can grind their way into the cash, but then they're going home. And they had a chance to really just make a call that's probably pretty standard, and they've got or most of the time, unless they're, their opponent might, sometimes they've got it right, but most of the time they're going to win, and then they're going to have a bigger stack, and they're going to be in a really good position to not only like attack, to attack the bubble too. Like they're then going to be in a spot where they can actually. So yeah, I think it's a really big lesson that some players need to learn.
I agree. And I just had another thought when you said that too. Oh yeah, so it is tricky because when you play a ton of these tournaments, like I'm not going to lose any sleep over if I bust near the bubble in one of them. Like it's going to happen at some point. It is tricky though if you're playing, one of these things every few months and you're late on day one. You're like, oh man, like this would feel great to at least get the cash so I can feel like this tournament was a win. And if you really want to play your best, you kind of have to just learn to get rid of that mindset. Like if you want to avoid the pain of being unlucky, just don't play poker to begin with.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we say that from time to time here. It's like if you just want to be sure all the time, take up chess, because
which that was me when I was young. But yeah.
No, you have to embrace this, and like we were talking about, they pay the top 10, 11, 12% of the field, which means that 85% of the time you're going to go home with nothing, right? Like as an MTT player specifically, don't you have to get like really intimately familiar with the experience of losing tournaments? Like, doesn't that just happen like way more often than anything else?
Yes. Yeah. No, as an MTT player, most times I lose. Even if I end up cashing in a lot of the tournaments I play, most of those require more than one buy-in. So yeah, you just kind of have to get used to it. And yeah, just never get too emotionally invested in one tournament because weird things happen all the time. I should say they're not even weird things. It's just normal poker things happen. And, and also, recognize that you'll be on the good side of that too. Like, when I'm a chip leader at a final table, it's not because I just outplayed everyone in every situation. Like I got aces when they got ace king. That usually happens too.
So I've got one more question, and then unless there's any new ones in the chat, we should let this man get on his way. Danny Wood does say mixed spots equals mega regret. Yeah, that's true. Although I think, as Wes is kind of saying, if we don't play as often, it's the pain we feel from busting before the bubble like hurts more because it's like a more absolute kind of pain. And we don't get enough of those moments where we did kind of fold our way down to nothing. And it's kind of harder to look back on that and make that decision. So I think, the only constant is the pain. The pain is going to be there for every time you don't win, right?
Yeah, and I will throw in there, like, even if you're someone who prefers playing live, if you want to get really good, I think you have to play some online for a few reasons. One, because it's easier to track. Two, because the competition's tougher. So even if you're not winning or you're winning at a small rate, like you really get to up your game a lot. And then also just volume. Like I probably play more hands of poker in a week, on an average week, than a lot of players do in a year, So you just get over that pain really quickly. Like if I play 15 tournaments in a day, I'll probably bubble one of them. That's just a normal Tuesday for me. So
yeah. Well, we've got one more question here in the chat from the RRRCCC, and then I've got one more question after that. Do you like poker books? Do you have a favorite poker book?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So I'm not a huge fan of the books because I feel like it's just so much more efficient to get the content online. I did really like Maria Konnikanova's book. Was it The Perfect Bluff?
The Biggest Bluff. Yeah,
The Biggest Bluff. Because I think that a lot of the mental game stuff that I sort of kind of had in my head for years, like I noticed people doing these things that were based off emotion, and I think she put a lot of it into words, into the right words, where I was like, oh, that's I've had that thought, but I didn't know how to say it. And I felt like I learned a lot from that. As far as like actual learning of poker strategy, I feel like I've gotten a lot more from YouTube videos and training sites.
So my last question, Wes, is so you're in a position where you sell action, and I think that puts you in this class of people that, you know, they have backers, they sell action, they have investors, you know, they have friends that like to come along for the sweat, that kind of thing. How does that change the way you feel about bubbling or not bubbling? How does it change the way you feel about like firing multi-bullets? Does it change it at all? Is it a conscious thing that you have to sort of be proactive about, or just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it doesn't, and that's partial. So I don't sell for everything, but I'll sell for the higher buy-in stuff that I play. And at this point, I sell it all to one guy who the amount of money that he has invested in me means nothing to him. He does it to be supportive, and it's fun for him to come along for the ride kind of thing. So no, I don't care. He's like, fire more bullets. Like, yeah. Plus I've made him some money, but
sure. So I guess that does take me to one more tangent, and then we'll wrap up the interview portion of the show tonight. You mentioned a couple times now, if you show up in a tournament and it's multiple re-entry, you're just firing. You're just going to fire as many bullets as it takes to kind of keep you in there until you feel like you're not playing your best game, or there's something that's
yeah. I've never, I don't know. I know there's some guys who just go insane in the early levels and kind of try and gamble to build up a big stack. And I'm not, I am prepared to fire multiple times. I've only fired, like I've done 5 bullets twice and never any more than that. I've done 4 a few times. Like there's a difference between being willing to fire again and just saying, you know, screw it, I'm going to gamble.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. No, every tournament buy-in is in itself a new tournament. That's how you have to look at it if you're doing it for profit. And so, yeah, if I have 50 or I guess like 10 big blinds at the end of a day one, I'm not going to be in the mindset of, oh, I need to double this up or it's not worth it. Like, no, if you just decide to punt off your last few blinds because you can buy in again, what you're really doing is just saying, okay, this tournament that I'm playing, I'm going to make that worth 0. Like you're always going to have another tournament, whether it's another day one flight of that tournament or a different tournament altogether. And those should all be viewed as the same thing. Like every individual buy-in, you need to try and make it the best that you can. So like, you know, I've seen people like, you know, maybe in a daily tournament at Canterbury, if you're on the last level of re-entry, you start with 20,000 in chips and you're down to 9,000. People will be like, you know, throw it all in with 10-7 offsuit because, well, I want to double or rebuy. It's like, well, what you're really saying is I'm just going to torch all the equity that I had. Like you're allowed to play another buy-in of any tournament, regardless of how this one goes. And I think a better way to look at it is like, if you think about ICM, your chip stack always has a dollar value. So if you're in I guess I should just try and rebuy. If you're in that mindset, you're just making that one go from whatever the dollar amount is to 0. If you're in that mindset. So to sum it up, yeah, I'm always willing to buy in more, but I always, I try and maximize every single buy-in, even if that means going on to day 2 with 6 big blinds. Like one of my MSPT final tables I made, I had 7 big blinds going into day 2. This couple weeks ago in Grand Falls, I was dead last place going into day 2 on one bullet, and I cashed, and I had a chance to actually build a pretty big stack if I had won the one hand I busted on. But
I really like that. So it sounds like even though you've got another tournament entry available to you, you should still respect your bullet, like respect the bullet that you're on, and respect the value that your stack has in that tournament. So I really like the way you said that about even if it means taking a short stack in, that's still better than nuking it and buying in again, because that buy-in's still there. It's still available to use for any other tournament. That doesn't mean you should light your current chances on fire.
Yeah, well, and think about like if you MSPT is an example, like that's an $1,100 buy-in. If you're late on day 1 or at the beginning of day 2, even if you only have, 5, 8, 10 big blinds, like your stack is worth probably multiple thousands of dollars. If you bust, you just threw away that much money. Like there's so much value in just having outlasted 87, 88% of everyone else. If you have to buy in again, you have to do that again. So yeah, don't throw away a buy-in.
Nice. Well, if folks want to get in touch with you, Wes, whether it's to just talk poker or to check you out, maybe take you up on some of your coaching offers, what's the best way for people to contact you if they're interested in doing so? Yeah,
I've started checking Twitter a lot more. Not a huge social media guy, but my Twitter is @PitcherCannon. If you're a Minnesota player, you play in the Midwest, whatever, always feel free to say hi to me on breaks. We can always chat then too. So
nice. And I'll make sure that link is in the show notes. Finally, which is the better podcast, Rec Poker or the Breakdown with Two Poker Guys?
Definitely the Rec Poker. I mean, the thing is, like, it depends which segment of the Poker Guys podcast. Like the Solver stuff's pretty cool.
Solver stuff's pretty high level.
That's true.
Yeah. It really elevates the entire show.
The thing about this show is it has some really strong Minnesota representation, and that other podcast has nothing like that at all.
Yeah, just blather.
Yeah. It's just Oregon nonsense over there.
Yeah, I don't know if Oregon podcasters are just dumb or they pretend to be dumb.
Yeah. But they put on, it is. I mean, it probably is just innate, but it could be just they put on an air for the fun of the show.
They're actually probably trying to be smart, but
it's so sad. It's so sad.
It is.
Oh, thank you, Wes. This was super fun, man. I knew it would be. We were overdue for this conversation. So, and thanks for all you do. Listen, for the poker world. I think even when you mentioned at the very beginning, just being a friendly, smiling person at the table, trying to make the game better for the people playing around you. That's not, I wish everybody had that same attitude. It's a part of the epidemic of live poker is that we need more people like that. People, smiling, friendly people at tables, wherever they're from. Okay, Oregon, fine, whatever. But no, thank you for being a bright light like that and for sharing that positivity with Poker World.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I wouldn't play poker as much as I do if I didn't have fun. And, I've done very well at it. And, I definitely recognize that I'm grateful I've done that well at it. And, I always, even if I take a couple bad beats, I try and take it in stride because I feel like, I think I'm one of the few poker players who I actually feel like I'm lucky in general. So,
yeah, good on you, man. Good on you. That's a good segue. So we're going to do our food bank raffle here. And I'll just say, people don't know, food insecurity is on a spectrum. There's lots of people that need a little help every once in a while. A lot of us don't know how lucky we are to not need to wonder where the next meal is going to come from. So if folks want to start typing the words food bank into the chat. We'll do our raffle shortly. Wes, thank you so much for coming on the show here. I hope we get a chance to connect in real life one of these days soon. I know we are planning Running Aces Rec Poker weekend sometime over the summer. So maybe we can make something happen there, if not before.
Yeah, I will be at the series all summer. We'll see. It depends on when that is, I guess. But yeah, no,
nice.
I've really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me on. It was nice to meet you guys.
Cheers, man. We'll be in touch. We're going to have a few people down there for the series in June as well. So maybe we can get a meetup and have it going. Thank you again, Wesley Cannon. And if folks want to get more involved with Wesley, you can check out the link in the show notes there and look him up on Twitter, or just look for the smiling guy at the table out there and go knock on his shoulder and tell him you heard him here on the Rec Poker podcast. Thanks again, Wes.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Well, we are going to talk about some home game results coming up here. It is time to start typing those words food bank into the chat. We were talking about the mid-stakes poker tour here, so I'll just jump in and say that if you're listening to this live, it is March 27th. You've still got a few days to get down to Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino and play in the mid-stakes poker tour event series that's going on there right now. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's some great prizes, some good people. And I know that you will enjoy yourself there if you do. I'm glad we finally got a chance to get Wes on the show and really bring some violence to the two poker guys on the breakdown, because I've told them for like a year and a half now, like the feud is on as far as I'm concerned. I don't mind punching up. I'll punch up.
I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Punch up. You never punch down, right? So that's the thing. They can't strike back, right?
What are they going to do? Yeah. We got them in a box. We got them right in the corner.
Well, the thing is do they even know we're punching?
Well, maybe not. But I may clip that one little segment about Oregon and send it their way just to have.
I think you should. Please do. They give you the gears enough, Chris. Good Lord. All these sandwich shop bits and whatnot. Come on. They don't know how good they've got it over there. Well, that was fun. It was great talking to Wes. And I hope some of our listeners, if you're interested in talking to him more, look him up on Twitter. Like I say, he did say he's got a few people he's coaching right now. But he's always looking for another person or two if they're the right kind of people, if they've got the right mindset and the right, attitude and are at the place in their own poker learning that it would make sense. So I would say don't hesitate. B Jam and Ben Enslow says, I don't think they know. I don't think they know that we're punching up. Yeah, well, they're going to learn. They're going to learn, those poker guys. They're going to learn what it feels like to get punched from below. John, why don't you take us through some home game results? And also, I saw a direct message. Oh, I could have interrupted you with this, but I didn't. I led with it instead. I saw a direct message come across that anyone who's won a silver pin, we've picked a date for the Go for the Gold annual gold pin competition, and it's right around the corner. I am freaking excited. I just can't wait to dip my toe in and try and be one of the first people to win the very first ever Rec Poker gold pin.
That this was going to be my first part of the topic anyway. So thank you for not interrupting me, for just leading right into it.
Professional segue.
The annual Go for the Gold tournament. If you are one of the 36 players who has won a silver pin, then you are eligible to play in the Gold for the Gold tournament to win the very first ever awarded gold pin for Rec Poker. It's going to be on April 19th. That is the third Wednesday in April. And it will be at our normal 8 p.m. Central Time, the only time zone that matters. And you can win your very own gold pin there. So be sure to sign up. I have private messaged everyone who is on that list. So if you got the message, sign up for the club. It is its very own exclusive club, and only silver member pin winners will be allowed in that club. Except for me, I am allowed in, but I'm not allowed to play.
Oh, the heavy is the head that wears the crown. John Somsky, he's flipping switches and pulling levers like no one's business back here, and we won't even let him play in the tournament. Oh my God.
No.
Just cruel.
There is one more chance on April 13th which is 6 days or 5 days before the April 19th tournament. I guess that'd be 6 if you do math.
Only if you do math.
Anyway,
though. Only if you do math.
Yeah.
But that will be the chance, the last chance to win a silver pin. And
Amazing.
I have actually qualified for that. So there's a shot. There's a shot.
So you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
And I really want to just reinforce to our members, 36, we've been doing these pins, we've been doing these tournaments coming up on 3 years. Oh my God. Wow. We've been doing these okay. And there are still only 36 silver pin winners. So this is a very exclusive club. Asterisk. Even more exclusive in the non-asterisk wing of the building. And you shouldn't miss this chance. If you've got, other plans on April 19th, if it's like a anniversary or a graduation or something, fine. But if you're like thinking about having dinner with your brother or something, maybe put that off to Thursday and come out and play in this tournament. And I just really do want to reinforce, it is a whole separate home game club that you need to join. So don't get caught flat-footed on Wednesday evening thinking you can just log into Poker Stars and join the tournament. This is an exclusive club. You'll have to join a separate club to play. But come and go for the gold. I'm really excited about that. And actually,
I'm hoping that one of the 35 deserving players actually wins the tournament.
Am I the only one with an asterisk? Because
that is the only only asterisk silver pin.
I don't know if I love that or hate that, because I got that pin. I'm so mixed right now because I won that pin fair and square, by the way. Well before I took this leadership role at RecPoker. I was just another RECing Crew member. I didn't have any pull or sway or anything. There was no maneuvering to win the pin or anything like that. I think I kind of love it that I'm the only asterisk winner. It's just not a circumstance that comes up very often. I think I'm going to really lean into that as if I haven't already. That's great. Before I let you continue, John, it occurred to me that our friends at the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino also deserve mention. The Running Aces anniversary is coming up in April 26th to 30th. It's a $500 buy-in event. That'll have multiple day ones to start. I should just make sure that everyone knows that, because they have a little more time. You've got a month to get yourself ready for the Running Aces anniversary tournaments from April 26th to 30th. Okay. That's the go for the gold, John. But of course, there were 10 or 14 or 26 other poker tournaments that went on this week that you've got results for.
Well, on March 20th, Poker Geek MN, John Somsky, won his first nightly event for the year. And this is actually how I qualified for the POC that I'm talking about next month. Keto Man 335, Kian Tavacoli got his fourth nightly event for the year.
Amazing.
Elvis 76 got his second nightly event for the year. A really mad guy got really his third nightly event for the year.
He's got to be mellowing out by now. He's got to be like a relatively content guy by now, you'd think, because he's winning a lot of these tournaments.
I don't know. What I'm beginning to think is because he was on tear for a while, and then he kind of slowed down for a little bit. So maybe that got his anger built back up.
That'd get me mad.
And maybe that is what fuels all of his victory. So I don't know. I'm hypothesizing. I don't know him personally, so this is just a pure guess on my part.
All right.
And we had East Coast Bitter Ben Enslow got his second night victory for the year. K-Poker Wannabe Ron Payton got his first nightly victory for the year. Nice. Aces 54320. Kathy Chang got her first night daily mixed victory for the year. Stewie 13 Stuart Carriage got his first international victory for the year. And Keck Geek, that would be Keck Geek Sr., got his second international victory for the year.
There you go.
And then Flying Bricks won the LPP event.
Oh, awesome, Sarah. Sorry.
So she can contact Jim at rec.poker for her free month at Learn Pro Poker.
I blew it. Flying Bricks, send me that email. Jim at rec.poker. I didn't mean to dox
I think we should take away one of his pins every time he doxes somebody. How about that?
I think that's a good idea.
I just get excited because I hear the screen name come up, and I know it's a fun person who I'm familiar with, and I want to congratulate them. But
it's almost like, hey, I know something. I gotta say it.
Yes, obviously you've met me before, John.
Yeah.
That's basically my MO around here. Well, thank you, sir, for all the work you do, John Somsky, putting the home game club together. I hope people appreciate all that you do, the effort that you go to. It's not just setting up these 10 to 11 home games every week, but it's also tracking all the results, keeping track of who has won what pins, the membership of the exclusive championship clubs that we have. It really is a lot. And so I will say, if you buy John Somsky a beer, this is my standing offer. If you are in the world and you see John Somsky and you buy him a beer, get photo evidence and tweet at me at RecPokerJim, and I will buy you a beer next time we get together in Las Vegas. Right now, it's looking like the last 2 weeks of June. So if you're going to be in Vegas for the last 2 weeks of June, see if you can find John Somsky and put a beer in his hand. And I think on a recent podcast, I also opened that invitation up to Chris Jones fans as well. So if you see Chris Jones in the world or John Somsky, they do travel together from time to time. You could get a twofer here, but make sure you put a beer in their hands, take a photo. I saw one really bad, when you fake photos, what's the tool that you use?
Photoshop.
I saw a really bad Photoshop version of someone pretending to buy John Somsky a beer. And I'm just going to say, you have to at least do a much better job Photoshopping than that in order to pass muster around here. But kudos. That was a good idea. I'm glad that people are working on that. So I think looks like, I will also say, folks, if you want to type food bank in, we've got a few contestants here, but there's still just a couple seconds before we get Chris and his magical nerdy die. Chris, you weren't here last week. I rolled a 1.
Did you really?
I did. I don't understand. I don't understand how this keeps happening, but that's what happened. It was a 1. Speaking of Chris Jones, he's going to be recording our deep dive play along seminar tonight. So if you're a premium member and you're listening live, you've still got a chance to join the group there. This is a fantastic program we do every month where Chris records the play of our premium members in a one-table simulated tournament scenario. He gets to see everyone's cards, but no one else can, of course. At the table, you're all just playing as you would normally. And then Chris and Daro Carney get together and find a few spots to analyze. And then a few of our premium members are going to get some personal feedback from Dara and Chris on how they can play better, on just some one-on-one feedback on how they can improve their play. So it's a great way to improve. It's a great way to have fun with our other RecPoker premium members. And there's a sign-up sheet. I think we have a couple seats left in tonight's game. If you're a premium member watching live, it's not too late to secure your seat. All right. So
before you go, I'm going to interrupt you.
Ooh, I like it.
I was just curious. In your efforts, when you actually used nerdy dice for other nerdy things, do you have this propensity to roll 1s? Because in certain games, I have heard that can be considered what is called a critical, where you might actually damage yourself when rolling a 1.
You know, it's a good question. I just, for the first time just now, did a little mental catalog. I was just looking back on many die rolls. There have been some inopportune ones, but I'm not sure they're like disproportionately high. I don't think it's, I think it's something about like the moment. I don't think it's quite like a straight me rolling 1s thing. I think it must be an element of something about the occasion that's bringing out the 1s. I really do. Because I mean, the odds aren't great. The odds aren't great that it's going to happen at that frequency. But that's a good point, John. I have done it a couple times. I've had like my weapon fly out of my hands and then like ricochet off something and then hit me and cause me some hit points or something like that. That's happened a non-zero number of times. I will admit that.
I feel like I'm going to need to intervene and get us back on track here for starting to talk about hit points. And
yes. All right. Let's do the roll here, Chris. We've got 3 contestants that I see, the RRRCCC Graphics 16, the fantastic Roger Schutte, who helps us with all our amazing podcast post-production, and Scott Radziwill are the three contestants in that order. So what are you going to do? Are you going to roll a 4-sided with a re-roll? Are you going to roll a 6-sided?
A 6-sider, and I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6.
All right, let's make it so.
And it's a 4. So that's Roger.
Roger, this is fantastic. I love when our active premium members win these prizes. So I've said it before, but Roger is such a phenomenal asset to the organization here. Literally every podcast that you have heard for the last year or two, Roger has been involved in the post-production, audio editing. He's helped provide bringing some images to it if you're watching on your phone or something. He's really improved the quality of the podcast, and he does it out of the goodness of his heart. I know Roger is also someone who appreciates the support that we lend food banks and how important it is to put food in the stomachs of people that need it. So congratulations, Roger. Roger, since you're already a premium member here at RecPoker, you've won a fantastic prize, a choice of prizes. And send me that email, jim@rec.poker. We're going to find some other poker sites to give you a free month to, or a coaching credit, or some other free some other paid resources that we're going to give to you for free. So thank you, and thank you for being a RecPoker premium member. It makes a big difference to what we do here. And the RRRCCC says there's nothing wrong with number 1. Hey, you said it, man. You said it. It's just there's something wrong with weird frequencies and things that happen in ways that they shouldn't happen. That's all. I blame the poltergeist. Folks, it has been a great show. I know, Chris, you've got to go set up the seminar here. Is there anything else that we should mention to our audience? Oh, and of course, if you're watching live, come on down to twitch.tv/RecPoker on Thursday night. Veronica Brill will be joining me in the commentary booth. Taylor Moss will be producing the finals, the final head versus head, best 2 out of 3 Marek Madness match. It's our own Chris Jones versus Keith Monkey System Brandt. The lockbox, says John. So I'm looking forward to that. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, you can see some fun YouTube videos that Chris has been putting out, sort of summarizing the action so far and just laying it down there, letting people know what they're in for. So I'd like to thank Chris Jones and Keith Brandt and all the other participants of Marek Madness for what they've been doing to make that fun. I want to thank all the people in the booth, Lara Eisenberg, Chris Fox Wallace, Daro Kearney, Rob Gardner, and Veronica Brill. And of course, we have to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. I have to thank Wesley Cannon for coming on the show, John Somsky and Chris Jones, everyone here in the YouTube chat, and mostly you, the listeners. You're the best. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week. Good night, everybody.